I'm Chuck. This is What is the Wheel. Tonight we're back on our Go Kart build. So we're going to be working on this Predator. Actually, that's a lie. We're not going to be working on it. We're going to be looking at all the stuff that's going to go into it and why I decided to get the parts I got to build a performance engine and what those parts are going to do. Oh yeah, like, subscribe, ring the bell. Don't like. It's all good. These are the parts I ordered for my Predator build. I'm going to go over them one at a time, why I decided to use each one, why I decided to select these items. The first thing is going to be this flywheel. This is a ARC or ARC, I don't know which name they go by. This is a billet aluminum flywheel. This is probably the most important thing you're going to get if you decide that you want to hot rod your Predator engine. The stock flywheel is not meant for high RPM use, and if you want to hot rod a Predator, you're going to have to spin it faster than stock. So go ahead and bite the bullet and buy one of these flywheels. It's got the magneto magnet in it, so the ignition coil fire. It looks pretty cool, although you'll never see it again because it's going to be underneath a cover. It does have the timing is already advanced on this, where they've cut the keyway in it. You're going to get approximately 32 degrees of advanced timing, which means that the spark is going to fire 32 degrees before the piston hits top dead center, and that will give that fuel mixture in there a chance to start burning and expanding before the piston reaches top dead center. That process, that chemical reaction is already in place, and then you're going to get that rapid expansion and force the piston down and get all kinds of fantastic power. The next thing, which goes with that billet flywheel, is this connecting rod. This is also made by ARC. This is a Predator connecting rod. You can see it says it right there. Speaking of which, Predators have Hemi and non-Hemi engines. They do not share a lot of parts. So make sure when you order stuff that you get the correct one for your motor. This one is a non-Hemi engine, which you can tell because if you look at it, it's got a steel valve cover, which is a good tip. Anyway, this is the ARC connecting rod. This is a lot stronger than the stock connecting rod. It can handle high RPM abuse much better than the stock connecting rod, and it also has this really cool feature right here where you can see this is called a dipper, and these little motors do not have oil pump in them. What they do, they use splash lubrication. So this little piece right here is just dipping into the oil and throwing it everywhere, and that's how the motor gets lubricated. But in the case of this, what they've done is, there you can see a little hole right there, and this little scoop shape here, and it runs into this port right there inside the bottom of the rod, and so it's basically shooting oil into this big end of the rod, and that oil is getting pushed out. There's also a where they at? Right here. We've got a set of bushings here that fit in there, so it's not just a plain bushing where this would be your load surface. And of course, the deal with this is, and why they last, is the oil. There's actually no metal to metal contact, or there shouldn't be any. The oil is actually cushioning the rod between the rod and the crankshaft. So this is riding on a layer of oil. So you want a nice amount of oil in there, and this is going to make really help with that. The stock rod only uses a small port. Get it in focus. Only uses a small port to oil, as far as I can tell. So you get a lot more oil with this. You're also getting in the top, in the small end here, you've got this little port in the top. You're getting oil from that as well. And that is a plain bearing. It just rides on the piston pin. So, but that is also a good piece when you're going to try and make more power, which basically by spinning the motor faster. That's how you're going to make more power. In addition to those two things, I added this is a Dyno Cams, what is it, a mod 2. So this is a modified camshaft, and it still retains the compression release to keep the motor easy to start, so you don't rip your arm off when you're trying to crank it. And what they have done with this is we've got a little spec sheet right here, and on the spec sheet, so it opens at 48 degrees before top dead center. So as the piston is coming up to top dead center in preparation for filling the cylinder with air and fuel, this one opens at 48 degrees before it reaches that top point, compared to the stock one, which is 43 degrees. So you're getting a little bit more, it opens a little bit earlier, and then it stays open until 82 degrees after bottom dead center. So the reason why it doesn't just open at top dead center is you got to get that air moving. You want to, it's like it seems like air weighs nothing, but it actually has mass. You got to get that air moving. So you wanted to open up a little bit before top dead center, and so it's the passageway is already clear. And then as the piston comes up and cycles down, it's going to draw that mixture into the cylinder. And since that mixture, like I said, has mass, it's going to start accelerating, and it will accelerate into the cylinder. And that's why you want the closing after bottom dead center, because even though the piston has started to come back up again to start its compression stroke, you're still getting mixture in there. You're still getting it, you know, it's moving, it's continuing to fill the cylinder, even though the space within the cylinder is getting smaller as the piston comes up. So we've definitely got, there's a bug flying around, so I'm waving my hand everywhere. Yeah, you've got, you're opening a little earlier, you're staying closed longer, so you've got more duration. The lift is approximately the same. Now, if I wanted to change that cheaply, or well, actually they're not that cheap, but if I wanted to change that without changing my cam, I could go to ratio rockers. And what that basically is you've got, like you have your rocker, and there's like this pencil, and if you had a 1-to-1, it would look like this. So you move this end 1 inch, and then this end moves 1 inch. Well, you can get a ratio rocker which moves this point, and so this moves, now it's 1.5. So this end moves 1 inch, this end moves 1.5 inches, and that gives you more lift, which gives you a greater opening, allows more easy ingress of fresh air and egress of your burnt mixture after you've had your spark plug is fired and you've had your expansion of gases and had your power stroke. So then we go to the exhaust side, and we've got, it opens 84 degrees before bottom dead center as opposed to the stock at 80, and then closes at 44 degrees after top dead center as compared to the stock, which is 41 degrees. So same thing, where basically this cam is giving us more duration. The valves are staying open longer, allowing intake mixture to come in for a longer period of time, and giving exhaust gas a little more opportunity to escape. As far as the cam profiles, they don't look, I don't have the stock cam out here, they don't look too dramatic. You'll see some, particularly like race cams, where it'll be almost a straight line up and a straight line across. It's like extremely hard opening of the camshaft, and this doesn't have that, which will probably make it idle a little bit better. It'll be a little better performer off from idle, off idle basically, instead of just being a high RPM performance cam. This should actually give a decent increase in performance without being lumpy and undrivable, because you know it's a go-kart. You can be racing around the yard with your friends and stuff, not drag racing it in most cases, unless you're building a drag racer. So that's the cam. And then in addition to this cam, we've got a set of, these are actually Honda factory parts. These are 18-pound springs, which is what they recommend. If I were to change to ratio rockers, it's possible I'd have to go to a higher valve spring pressure. These are 18s. I believe the stocks are 12. And the reason you're putting these on there is because this thing is, it's going to be spinning faster, and the valves themselves also have inertia. So they're going to tend to, when they're closed, they're going to want to stay closed. When they're open, they're going to want to stay open. And if you have a really light spring, when this thing drops, especially if you have the more dramatic the drop off is on the cam lobe, the more suddenly that valve drops, the more spring pressure you're going to need to get that spring to stay following the cam. You want it to stay on. You want the tappet to stay on the cam all the time, and that will help that, and especially when you're spinning the motor faster, because it's going to be moving much quicker. So you're going to need a heavier spring, and they make them way heavier than this, but you're going to need a heavier spring to get that keep that cam tappet on the lobe of the camshaft. And then let's see, the last thing, well, not the last thing, but I'm going to show this. This is a Walbro pump. This is a fuel pump, and if you keep the tank in the stock location, you don't really need one of these. I'm going with a tank that's either going to be mounted on the floorboard or on the back of the seat. It's probably going to be lower than the carburetor, so I'm going to need a fuel pump. And what this pump does is fuel comes into it and fuel comes out of it, obviously. And how that works is you have and I'm probably pointing at the wrong one because I haven't even looked at this too close yet, but you're getting a pulse from the crankcase. I'm going to use the hole that the governor was in. I'm going to thread it and put a fitting in there and use the pulse from the bottom end of the motor, the crankcase end of the motor, to cycle this pump up and down. Because just as the motor is a pump on the top side above the piston, it is a pump on the bottom side. So you're getting this like in and out pulsing, and there's a diaphragm in this, and it's going to pump fuel, come in one side, go out the other side to the carburetor, and maintain a constant fuel pressure. Probably I'll also run a big fuel filter, and the reason for running a big one is when you're running hard side to side, that big filter will act as a reservoir, so you don't lean out and stumble when you're going through a hard turn. That thing's going to it'll be full of fuel. It'll be in a position where it's basically straight up and down, and it'll act as a reserve just in case there's enough slosh within the tank to expose the pickup point. All right, and then the last thing, because I've got all this other stuff, I'm spinning the motor faster. I've got this bigger cam that's got more duration, so I'm getting more air in there, and that means I need more fuel, which means I need this thing. And this is a genuine, it's got dog hair on it, genuine Mikuni carburetor. It's marketed as a 26 mil. I have heard a couple of people say that they measured these at 28, and I'm pretty sure what they did was this. They fired up their, they zeroed it out. There we go. They fired up their, whoops, turn it this way so you can read it. They fired up their dial indicator. No, that's not a dial indicator. They fired up their mic, and they measured, and it's in millimeters. That's what we wanted. Wait a minute. What's going on here? Look at that. It's reading 40.60. Let's just zero that back out. Okay, there we go. That is wrong. Okay. So they measured here, and they're like, oh my gosh, this thing's not 26. It's almost 28. Well, the issue is they're measuring this outer bore right here. They need to be measuring down inside. So what we're going to do is take this thing. This is called a snap gauge, and it's got a little piece that loosens up. These little things are springy. We're going to spring them in, stick it inside the carburetor, open it up, maybe. I'm going to tighten it up so tight I can't ever get it loose. Let's try it again. There we go. I'm going to open it up a little bit. We're going to rock it, tighten the lock down, double check our mix there. We're going to the wide spot down inside the carb where you can kind of see it's been machined down in there. And then we'll check that with the mic. And it's going to watch it make a liar out. Nope. There we go. 26.01. So it is a 26 millimeter Mikuni carburetor. I have heard that the Chinese made Mikunis, and I don't know if those are licensed Mikunis or not, but I've heard that the Chinese made Mikunis this is a VM26, that the VM26s are not actually a 26 millimeter bore like this one is. But this should be a genuine Mikuni carb. We've got your fuels coming in here. This should be your bowl vent so that you're not getting pressure inside the bowl. And then this is your bowl drain. So the advantage of this carburetor, one of them is, one thing, we know it's a 26 millimeter bore. It also has this on it, which is an enrichment circuit rather than using a choke plate, which is this, a plate that's in the throttle bore, and it's always there. Even when it's open, it's still there, it's obstructing flow. Well, with this thing, the enrichment circuit just provides extra fuel. So if I can get it open here, the bore is open all the time. Let's see here, get my finger out of the way. So that bore is open. When it's open, it is fully open. And so you don't have any obstructions or restriction to fuel flow. If I could have gotten one, I actually would have liked to have gotten a flat slide, but those are even more. The Chinese Mikunis are like 50 bucks. This was about $110. I think it's worth it. It has access on the bottom. You don't have to take the bowl off to get to the main jet. And I've got the box full of jets here because this came from a motorcycle shop. It was not a Go Kart specific part. So I don't have any idea how it's jetted. So I'm just going to have to fire it up and see how it runs. Now, all this stuff, let's see, this is about $110. Like I said, you can get the Chinese ones, which will probably be fine because this is a stock Predator carb. And you can see, we're going in the right directions here. Which is the inside. That's the choke right there. Okay. So you can see the differences in the bore. I've measured this one before. It's like right at 19 millimeters. So it's not very, this is a much larger bore. I did the math, and I probably got it wrong, but I did the math the other day. This is effectively almost twice the size, volume-wise, or area-wise, of this stock carb. And that means you can put a lot more air in that motor, which means you can put a lot more fuel in that motor, and you can make a lot more power. The downside, because I'm like, hey, well, let's put a 50 millimeter one on there. Well, the issue becomes, like I said before, air has mass, and the bigger the carburetor is, the more bog you can get because the air doesn't want to move, and you whack the throttle open, and nothing happens because the air don't want to go anywhere. And so you hit the gas, and the thing goes whoop, and then it takes off. You ever watch guys drag racing? Sometimes you'll see that, and that is probably at least partially why that happens. So we got that. Oh, and let's go over pricing. I believe I got I bought a kit. This came from OMB Warehouse. They did a great job. I ordered this website. It was pretty easy to figure out. They had a kit that included the flywheel, the rod, the cam, and a gasket kit, which is laying in a box around here somewhere. And that was 260 bucks. So this flywheel by itself is like $120. This rod is, what was this rod? This rod's about 65 bucks, I think. And the cam was also about the same price. So it was cheaper to buy those parts at once. I had to buy this separate. They did not have a kit that included this carburetor in it. I think they did have a couple of kits that included the mod version of the stock carb, which is basically a bored out version of this carb, which is, if you're racing in a stock class, that can be the way to go. It did not include the springs, which I think they really probably should, particularly with that cam kit in there. They should have included the springs. I don't think they did. Anyway, I believe I had to order those separately. But the springs were like 10 bucks a pair, not a big deal. So definitely, kind of figure out what you want to do. This thing, since this came from a motorcycle shop, it did not have an adapter. The Chinese carbs have an adapter, bolts right on to the head, makes installing the carburetor much easier. For this, I just have a piece of silicone hose here, and I'm going to have to make an adapter, which, as much as I'd love to make one out of aluminum, I don't have a chunk of aluminum big enough to make one. So I think I'm probably going to create a steel. This actually is a gasket off the stock one, but basically I'm going to take a piece of flat steel like this, and I'm going to braze a steel tube in this diameter. In this diameter right here, I'm going to braze a steel tube on there, and it's going to be like this. It's probably just going to be this piece of this like weld stuff right here. This stuff is cheap and heavy. It's not structural, but it doesn't have to be structural. So I'll cut it, I can get it the length I want, because I can, I got a couple of feet of it here. I get it the length I want, get the angle I want. I'll radius this part out, radius the but this one's got the crap beat out of it. But I'll radius this a little bit to ensure that we're not getting a stumble in the flow. And then while I got to take the head off. While I've got the head off, I plan to port it some and polish out the exhaust side and just clean the intake side up, and then port match to whatever adapter I make for this, so that I don't have a ledge or a step that's goofing up my airflow. And who knows how much power I get, and I won't know because I don't have any way to dyno test it, but I'm pretty sure that this combination of parts should give me a substantial improvement in power while also keeping it drivable, because that's going to be the other thing. Is this, it's not going to be any fun if it's bogging and stumbling and all that kind of stuff. If you want it to be fun to play with, I'd rather have a little less power and have it be more drivable. And if I was going to try and build a drag racer, or like a mini bike drag bike, which is an idea for a future project, then that would definitely be something to consider. So that is the also, it's not really a performance part. Plenty of Tygon tubing, because you got to have decent fuel line. I like this fuel line you can see through. I run this stuff on my motorcycles, so I can look down there and go, okay, well, I clearly have fuel. That is not the reason why this 25-year-old bike going to run. And I think that's about everything for tonight. We got anything other parts? No other parts. So once again, what is the wheel? Have a great night.